threat coming from outside the territorial sphere of the country, from Iran in this case, then you mobilize Wahhabi and Salafi discourse, sectarian, in fact, discourse, so that you can defend your country. So sectarianism, in many cases, used to be used and exploited as a defensive tool, and in other cases, it would be used as offensive tool, offensive strategy. So if you want to interfere in other countries' business, you would use sectarianism. Why is this? Because we have Shia in Lebanon, so we have to interfere in Lebanon. We have Shia in Bahrain, or we have Sunnis in Iraq, and these Sunnis are oppressed now. So we, the Saudis, or we, the Qataris, or we, the other Sunni country, we have the legitimacy to go there and try to help our brothers. Now, you have all kinds of claims, but fundamentally politics is there. The machinery, the vehicle of all these claims, of all these maneuvers is politics. Either politics of survival, or politics of maybe aggression, or seeking more influence or leverage in the region. Then once you have the political ambition, then you try to employ any tool that is at your disposal. And in this case, sectarian claims and sectarian politics. Maybe one other thing to be mentioned, nowadays, because there is another paradox, another maybe ironic dimension and aspect to the sectarian sweep in the region. Now, if you think nowadays, what is happening in Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon, so you have this kind of crescent or arc, which was described by, I think, King Abdullah of Jordan as the Shia crescent. So you have Iran, Syria, South Lebanon, and even to Gaza and Palestine with Hamas. So this is a crescent, this is the Shia crescent. So if you think of it, especially with the coming of the Syrian revolution, 2011, the regime in Syria, which is used to be for many years very close to the Iranian regime, in fact, their biggest ally, their strongest ally since day one, back in late 1970s. And why is this? Because of another sub-rivalry between Iraq and Syria. So now you have another thing. Iraq and Syria, historically speaking, been in this struggle and in this competition maybe, and enmity since, again, the 70s. With Iran coming and with the Iranian war, Iran was desperate for any Arab ally. And Syria, because of the hostility against Iraq, they were on the side of Iran. So since then, since early 1980s until now, you have this very strong Iranian-Syrian alliance. With the Arab Spring, the Syrian regime was in danger of falling. So the Iranians got very worried. And they said, no, this is something very dangerous. If the Syrian regime is falling, this means we are losing our strongest base maybe at the heart of the Arab world. So since then, they tried to help the Syrian regime. And not only this, they started again to mobilize, as the Saudis did, to mobilize the religious and sectarian discourse, saying what, in fact, the Alawites in Syria, with some Shia shrines in Syria, are threatened by the Sunni militant groups. So now we are interfering in Syria to support our brothers in sect, our brothers in Shiism or other sects that belong to Shiism, because Alawites somehow belong to the broader Shia faith. So now, as you can see, the national borders, the nation state somehow is disappearing. So you have the Iranians going to Iraq. Iraq is now ruled by Shia majority parties, and very close to Iran. So you have this influence, the Iranian influence into Iraq, and then into Syria, without somehow paying attention to all these national borders. So the nation state, which was supposed to be against all these religious maybe or tribal overarching allegiances or loyalties, and then should be established and consolidated over decades, is now becoming weak. And all these borders became very thin. So you just can travel from Iran to Iraq and sit to Syria and support, the whatever side of the conflict you like, as if there is no boundaries. And nowadays, the so-called Islamic State in Iraq and Syria is just moving freely between Iraq and Syria, fighting here and fighting there. So what is the Syrian-Iraqi border? What is the nation state in this conflict? And they wanted to go to support, the Shia, the Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the Hezbollah is coming to Syria again to support the Shia. So it's very fluid, very kind of chaotic situation nowadays in terms of understanding the nation state as such as the main political unit that has been, should have been in fact consolidated in the post-colonial era in the region. Now, the irony of this is what? Is that when it comes to certain borders, let's say the Turkish borders or the Jordan in the north or the Jordanian borders in the south of Syria, these borders, the so-called artificial colonial borders, they became the main shield to stop this sectarian sweep from spilling over into any domain or any territory without any controls. So in fact, these borders, in one side, they are kind of disappearing. On another side, they are kind of the main strong shield against the sweep of sectarianism. So again, it's another maybe paradoxical aspect that we have to keep an eye on and witness what are the dynamics when it comes to the nation state and then these trans-border loyalties. Because one major thing when it comes to the relationship between, or let's say the dynamics of sectarian politics in the region is this kind of carelessness about the national border. So, and the claim that we Shias or we Sunnis, we belong to each other much more or stronger, we have stronger allegiance to each other than our fellow citizens. So if I am, let's say, if I am a Saudi Shia in the eastern province, where you have the majority of Saudis are Shias, so because I am Shia, so I feel strongly towards Iran. So I feel I have strong bonds with Iranians than with my fellow Saudi citizens. If I am Iranian Sunni and I feel like suppressed because of the Iranian politics, because of the Iranian politics dominated by Shia orientation, I feel more maybe allegiance to the Sunnis in Iraq or Sunnis in Saudi Arabia. So this kind of a transnational, trans-border allegiance is again another manifestation of this very dangerous sectarian politics, because you don't have the notion of citizenship that I belong to this state, and this state is my own protector, and the state is in fact deals with me on equal footing, regardless of my sect, which is not the case, of course. And because it's not the case, people in fact are prone to all these sectarian calls because they don't feel treated equally. Let's say in Bahrain, maybe in Iraq, wherever you have the other sect is dominating the country, then the rest of society would feel like discriminated against, and they don't feel like second-class citizens. So this is why I think the biggest failure, the largest kind of opening, gap in the system, where all these sectarianism, all these kind of dangerous tendencies managed to get it through, because the whole notion of citizenship has not been consolidated enough in the region, and people wouldn't feel equally treated by the state. the state would be biased towards the group that controls politics. If a given tribe or a given sector or a given ethnicity is ruling the country, then these are the privileged ones, and the rest of the same story elsewhere. So, but maybe the new dimension is what the new dimension in this very old occurrent story is the availability of sectarian politics on the border. So, because you feel like weak and discriminated against, oppressed, I am coming to rescue you, I am coming to help you against the state, which is supposedly to be your main protector. Now, let me move, this is the national, we spoke about the regional level, the national level, and let's now move to the society level. And again, every single one of these somehow channels, the problems and wrong politics maybe to the other level. Now, at the level of society, what can we see? Now think of it, you have authoritarian regime, of course, and politics. Somehow controlling society, controlling the people, so driving them, of course, to the corner. They have no say in public affairs whatsoever. The management of the country is in the hand of the few, and everybody else, of course, is stripped of any saying or political participation. The same story again under any authoritarian or dictatorial regime. But what are kind of the consequences? What kind of manifestations? What kind of let's say openings this kind of situation would offer to any coming sectarian discourse or any sectarian media? Now, because it's a very closed system, of course, any opening, any gap, and now we can bring in the notion or the idea of public sphere. If you have a very closed authoritarian system, any opening, any liberated area would offer some free speech, freedom, political participation, critical thinking, free media. This is happening again in any society. So you have the authority of the state, the authority of the regime, the power on the top, somehow giving certain areas, freeing some spaces for the public to function, to debate, to have some relative freedom. This free, emancipated space would be filled with civil society again, with free speech, with media, this and that. Now, and this process takes place almost every single society. And you have all the time this process of negotiation between the public from the bottom and the authorities, be them authoritarian or be them benign, maybe, or even democratic. You have all the time this kind of conflict, tension, negotiation between the people from bottom up and the authority top down. So the bigger and the larger spaces and the spheres the public would acquire and would win, then more democratic atmosphere you would end up with. Again, if we apply this is called, by the way, or part of it called the Habermas model. Maybe you came across this, or some of you discussed this one. So Habermas, the German theorist, he keeps saying, you have to have this kind of public sphere, because this is the sphere where people can criticize, can think freely, can challenge the state or any other authority. This is their independence, and this is where they can stop the state or the transgressive politics of the state, and they can question, in fact, the state or any other authority. In any dictatorial system, of course, you have these spaces are very limited. In any democratic system, by contrast, you have these spaces are bigger. So people who can speak and can criticize and can do political participation. Now, in the Arab countries, as it happens in other cases as well, wherever you have any authoritarian regime, we somehow continue to have very limited spaces, very limited public spheres in the region for almost the entire period after the decolonization, until we have the Arab Spring. With the Arab Spring, suddenly you have some of these regimes kind of falling down, and then the entire space is now open as public sphere. So people can just do whatever they like freely, suddenly. Over a very short period of time, you have the regime in Egypt, the regime in Tunisia, in Libya falling. And now, in theory, you have the people managing to regain their freedom and then to take part in public affairs, to speak up, to criticize, to do whatever they want to. So again, the vertical authority, the authority of the state is now receding. In fact, it is now removed. And the public are on the rise, rising. This is, again, part of the Habermasian model in Europe after the Second World War. That you have to have this public sphere in Germany after the Nazis, and in Italy after the fascist rule, in Spain, and elsewhere, of course. But anyway, what happened, the main difference, the big, in fact, difference, in the cases where you have, in the case of the Arab countries, where you have different forces, different authorities, you are removing the authority, the vertical authority, but guess what? Who is filling the vacuum? The created vacuum is a new force, horizontal force, that is religious discourses. Because religious discourse, be it from the state that has been manipulating religion over decades, or be it from religious movements and Islamist movements, again manipulated and used over decades, is now ready, standing on the fence. And once this removal took place, that you have the vertical, the top authority is removed, and instead of having the public sphere for everybody, for a critical thinking, for deliberation, for even a creative art, all these kind of things, emancipation, in fact. When you talk about public sphere, you think of all sorts of individual and group emancipations. Free themselves from the authorities of the state. Again, the power and the authority of the state is now removed, and instead you have other forms of authority, now religious authorities, saying not necessarily from the top, maybe horizontally, but they claim the higher moral ground. Maybe they don't have the force, they can't impose maybe on people what to do by force and police, but they claim to have the truth, the religious truth. So as if now we are replacing one force, compulsory authority, with another one which is now in this case voluntarily, somehow optional, having the religious claim. Now, I am saying this at the societal level, at the public sphere level, so that we can place and we can situate, the role of the media, which is now the fourth level of the whole debate. And again, think of this: we have now a sudden vacuum taking place speedily, and then you have all these discourses. Many of them are still in the maturing maybe phase. Some of them never even practiced politics. Most of them do not believe in maybe pluralism or coexistence with other discourses. So you have somehow raw politics, raw politically speaking, raw political kind of discourses driven by believing in the religious truth, filling in the public sphere. So you have somehow, when it comes to the media, you have this assumption that is in any given public sphere, you have free media. Free media encourages and should lead to free thinking and critical thinking. So it's like a chain, like kind of one phase leads to another. these assumptions. Of course, I mean, with so many reservations and critique, but this is the main story, if you like. The main story, if you have free media, you have, relatively speaking, of course, because maybe some people would say there is no free media whatsoever anywhere, which is, it does have some truth in it. But let's say relative free media would lead to emancipation, free thinking. People, they just follow whatever they want, and most importantly, they would challenge any authority. Primarily the authority of the state, then secondly, any claimed authority, be it coming from religious sources or any other sources. And nurturing what I call the gray area. The gray area, the area that doesn't believe in true or false, wrong or right. Because most of the things, most of social, human affairs, they just lie in the middle ground between saying, well, yes or no, or this is right or wrong. You have vast area in the middle. Here you have, this is the creation of free thinking and free media. Now, if you have a public sphere where you have an ideology, any ideology, communism, Marxism, I don't know, religious ideology, that claims to have answers to anything that would face human beings with yes or no, wrong or right, do this or don't do this. So you are eliminating the gray area in the middle. So instead of widening and broadening the gray area and saying, well, I really don't have an answer. What I do have is just an attempt to answer these challenges or these questions. My pursuit is only to try to find an answer. Then you have somebody who would say, well, with my religious discourse and my now religious media, I have all the answers. In fact, you just only have to ask. I have the fatwas. So it's like a catalog, a constitution. Anything is answered in my catalog. So now the coming of religious discourses, again, be them on the level of the state or that of the Islamist movements, came into the public sphere with this ideology that we have answers, as we used to have them all over the place and all over the time as well. So there is no free thinking. This is in fact